Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1085 for December 1st, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
We've got about 6 years of this in a pipeline that is in that perfect spot, the perfect floor. Had to move some stuff around, but man, we're just over the moon. I mean, other than my own kids, this is my pride and joy,
The last time Ian Somerhalder and Paul Wesley appeared on WhiskyCast in August of 2022, they had just launched their Brothers Bond Bourbon. The actors turned whiskey makers have just released a 7-year-old bottled-in-bond version of Brothers Bond, and they'll join me later on WhiskyCast In-Depth for a wide-ranging conversation. I'll have tasting notes for their new whiskey in the What I'm Tasting This Week department, along with Behind the Label and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
The second release in Dewar's 4-part collector series, Dewar's Double Double 38-Year-Old, is now available. It's a tribute to the Scottish Highlands, and it's like nothing you've had before. More in a minute.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. It's been a busy week, and we'll start with news of Stoli Group's U.S. unit and Kentucky Owl Bourbon filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The filing will allow Stoli to continue operating while it restructures its debts. That includes a $5.5 million unsecured debt to Bardstown Bourbon Company. The news is not as good for Ireland's Waterford whiskey, which closed its doors and went into receivership on Wednesday after weeks of trying to raise additional capital. Waterford opened its doors in 2015 after Mark Rainier bought the old Guinness brewery in Waterford and converted it into a distillery. He wanted to focus on creating unique flavors in single malt whiskey and largely succeeded. The receivers will attempt to sell the distillery as an ongoing business, but may wind up selling it off in pieces, including the stockpiles of maturing whiskey. And we should note that Waterford was a sponsor of WhiskyCast. Also out of Ireland, Proximo Spirits has cut ties with Proper No. 12 founder Conor McGregor following his guilty verdict in a civil rape trial in Dublin. McGregor sold Proper No. 12 to Proximo in 2021, but had continued to represent the brand. The move follows most of Ireland's major retailers pulling Proper No. 12 off their shelves following the verdict. Turning to politics now, President-elect Donald Trump announced plans to impose 25% tariffs on all imports from Canada and Mexico when he takes office next month. The tariffs are intended to punish Canada and Mexico for allowing illegal immigrants and drugs to cross the U.S. border. Spirits industry leaders are hoping that Trump will exempt Canadian whiskey and tequila from the tariffs. Under the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement negotiated during the first Trump administration, both Canadian whiskey and tequila enjoy the same protected status as bourbon. That is, they can only be produced in Canada and Mexico, respectively. Industry leaders argue it's not fair to hit products that legally can't be made in the U.S. with tariffs. Brown-Forman executives are expected to address the tariff threat when they release their quarterly earnings report later this week. The company announced a change in leadership this past week. Board Chairman Campbell Brown will step down next July and be replaced by his cousin, Marshall Farrer, who has been Brown-Forman's chief strategic growth officer. Both are fifth-generation descendants of Brown-Forman founder George Garvin Brown. If you've ever wanted to try some contraband bourbon, Kentucky state regulators are giving you the chance to bid on bottles of whiskey seized in various raids. There are 32 bottles in the auction, which runs through December 11th. They include 2 bottles of Old Rip Van Winkle 10-year-old, a Japanese edition of Blanton's Gold, and bottles of E.H. Taylor, Eagle Rare, Weller, Willet, and Four Roses, just to name a few. We've posted a link to the auction in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com, but you have to be able to pick up the bottles at ABC headquarters in Frankfurt. New whiskeys of note this week. The Whiskey Exchange released its annual Black Friday whiskey on Friday. It comes from an undisclosed Highland distillery on the island of Jura, which should make it pretty easy to guess. The 16-year-old whiskey will sell for £74.95 a bottle while supplies last. Tom & Toole has released a special whiskey to celebrate master distiller Robert Fleming's 50 years in the Scotch whiskey industry. The 50-year-old single malt was distilled in 1973 and matured in a PX sherry barrique. Only 253 decanters will be available at a price of £10,000 each, and Robert Fleming will join us on an upcoming episode of WhiskyCast. Douglas Lang & Company has released the latest edition in its Old Particular red wine cask collection. The 16-year-old single-grain whiskey comes from Girvan Distillery and was finished in a single Merlot red wine cask. It's selling in the UK and select global markets for £85 a bottle. The independent bottler Lady of the Glen has released a 26-year-old single grain from North British Distillery as part of its final releases for 2024. The tranche also includes a 35-year-old blended Scotch, a 15-year-old Macduff single malt, and malts from Mannockmore, Loch Lomond, Glenlawsie, Ardmore, and Royal Bracklaw. Murray McDavid is celebrating its 30th anniversary with a new Coastal Embrace collection. It's a series of 28-year-old blended malt Scotch whiskies finished in cognac, rum, Oloroso sherry, PX sherry, and red wine casks. The whiskies will be available starting this month at whiskey specialist shops in the UK. Spirit of Yorkshire Distillery has bottled a single cask malt whiskey for the Harvey Nichols stores in the UK. It's an ex-Moscatel wine cask, bottled at 50.6% ABV, and is available for £120 a bottle. In the U.S., the World Whiskey Society has bottled what may be one of the strongest whiskeys ever produced. The Wyatt Earp 13-year-old American Whiskey Hazmat Edition is bottled at a whopping 80% ABV and comes from a mash bill of 73% malted barley, 15% malted rye, and 12% malted wheat. It's available through the Society's website and select retailers for $249 a bottle. Casey Jones Distillery in Hopkinsville, Kentucky is celebrating its 10th anniversary with the release of the Founders 10th Anniversary Edition whiskey. It's a blend of their straight bourbon and barrel cut, their proprietary spirit distilled from corn and cane. It's available exclusively at the distillery for $99.99 a bottle. Kentucky's Town Branch Distillery also makes beer and has been releasing a Maple Barrel Imperial Stout for the last 4 years. Now they've taken the barrels used to age that beer and used them to finish their Town Branch Bourbon. Only 300 cases are available nationwide, with a recommended retail price of $69.99 a bottle. And finally, the Mavericks at New Hampshire's Tamworth Distilling have released a holiday whiskey that has the essence of roasted goose, because there's roasted goose in the whiskey. House of Tamworth Spruce and Goose also has foraged white spruce tips and plums. The distillery recently purchased some land and is pledged to plant one native white spruce tree for every bottle of Spruce and Goose sold. It's available through the distillery's website, Seal Box, and the New Hampshire State Liquor Stores for $65 a bottle while supplies last. You can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's open up the inbox now and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. Whiskey Live Beirut is this Wednesday through Friday. Sagamore Spirit Distillery holds its annual holiday tree lighting Friday night at the distillery in Baltimore, Maryland. The Kendal Whiskey Festival is also on Friday evening in Kendal, England, and Whiskies of the World Miami takes place on December 12th. Finally, the Scotch Whisky Experience in Edinburgh, Scotland, has its annual Distillers Fair on December 29th and 30th. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Dewar's Double Double 38-year-old is the second release in a 4-part limited edition collector series honoring Scotland's most legendary whiskey regions. This rare blended malt, a tribute to the Upper Scottish Highlands, is crafted from nearly 4-decade-old Highland and Islay whiskies. It undergoes Jura's unique 4-stage aging process with a final finish in Pedro Jimenez sherry casks from the prestigious Royal Brackla single malt. The finish invites you to explore your own tasting notes, but for me, there's incredible depth, with rich layers of vanilla, toasted cereals, dried figs, plums, dark chocolate, and a subtle hint of Islay smoke, all beautifully balanced. To truly elevate this tasting experience, renowned chef Gabriel Cruther, in collaboration with Jurors, has created an exclusive selection of custom chocolates. Crafted from the world's finest ingredients, each piece is infused with a few precious drops of Jurors Double 38-year-old whiskey, making this a luxurious and unforgettable pairing. Now available, this exquisite pairing of whiskey and chocolate promises to deliver an unforgettable experience. Please drink responsibly. Copyright 2024. Jurors is a trademark. Imported by John Dewar & Sons Company, Coral Gables, Florida. Blended Scotch whiskey, 48.8% alcohol by volume.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Oban and the Classic Malts lineup. Actors Paul Wesley and Ian Somerhalder launched Brothers Bond Bourbon nearly 3 years ago, based on the bond they developed while working on the TV series The Vampire Diaries. They've gone past making just the usual celebrity whiskey, though. They've also released a rye whiskey and a bourbon made using corn grown through regenerative agriculture. Their latest release is a 7-year-old bottled-in-bond bourbon, and I talked about it with Ian and Paul on an occasionally wonky Zoom call recently. So what are you in the middle of?
So check it out, man. So I'm going to pour some of this. This is actually the first bottle that came off that we got. We are, first and foremost, thank you for being here with us, brother. We're so grateful to be on this show with you. You have such a massive voice and such an insane palate. But, I don't know if you saw it. I think we sent it to you. Did you see the damn Forbes Tasting Alliance article that came out on Wednesday or last week, week before last?
Yeah, I think I saw it.
Rated, it's like Forbes, according to New York, top 5 whiskeys in the world. First one, you scroll down, Brothers Bond, bottled in bond. I was like, what in the hell? And then obviously, starting as of last Monday, just sales just skyrocketed. People are clamoring to get it. And we're just trying to kind of keep up at this point. So, but it's just really, really powerful, man, to be able to sip this with you. Cheers, Paul. Cheers, Mark.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers, buddy.
This is like.
What do you think, though, Mark? Let's hear it from you, brother.
Well, I like it. I'm getting a little bit. I'm not getting as much of the notes that you guys got in the official tasting notes. Let me pull my notes up here.
Wait, you know what, Mark? Look on the back of the bottle.
I am.
Look on the back of the bottle, and on the very bottom by the punt, you're going to see. I think we made sure to send you some tiny little numbers after the 2024. Do you have the bottle with you?
Yeah, I'm looking at it.
It's horribly small. But do you see the last 4 numbers? What are those? So it's after the date, and then there'll be 4 numbers.
I have 0910.
I have 0726.
So, okay. So here's the thing. That was not supposed to happen, Mark. I will make sure that, Spencer, we get you another bottle immediately, because up until bottle 787, the notes change. And it's I'm telling you this because we had a little bit of an issue on the bottling line.
Well, we are recording this, so this could be offline.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, so 787 up to 787, I think was the first 787 bottles. And you're probably getting more fresh cut oak as opposed to really mature, what were those notes that you were getting?
On the nose, I was getting caramel apples, soft spices, a hint of oak, and honey and vanilla.
Yeah, so it shouldn't be a hint of oak. It should be a giant bear hug soliloquy of oak.
And the taste, I was getting cherry cola, dried fruits, black pepper, caramel, red apples, and maple syrup.
Mm.
And the finish was long, spicy, and bold.
Sort of like Paul, long, spicy, and bold. Mark, I'm going to get you the other one.
Okay.
And Spencer, we'll make sure, and I'll get you tracking information. It's one of those things that we lost sleep over and should have really paid attention, especially getting it to you. But we, there, after that threshold, it's people really going nuts.
Well, there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with that bottle. It's just the way. Yeah. It's just a different taste profile than what the original intention was.
Yeah.
Well, that's okay. You still nailed it with this one. This one is good.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's one of those things, it's the craziest thing, since we've last spoken on air together on your show. It's amazing how much changes and the learnings, especially, the key learnings. But, perfect production is a wild thing. And getting that perfection or really good, obviously, because perfection is the enemy of good. But having this blend that people are really coming together over at that level, 98 points in San Francisco, finals for best in class, double gold, obviously. And then in New York, incredibly high, double gold. But this is that thing I think people now are realizing, like, hey, these guys putting their money where their mouth is. They've sat on some bourbon for quite a while. They made the right barrels. 7 year is kind of that sweet spot. And it raises a big question, which is we'll get you the other bottles, but it's just at such a kind of perfect sweet spot. Next year it'll be 8 years. And so you can only hope that it's this good with an additional 12 months under its belt. But now that, people are really kind of clamoring for it, we're going to continue to bottle. So it'll probably wipe through a lot of that, all of our 7 year. So we'll get 7 year again, right? But so it's special. We've got about 6 years of this in a pipeline that is in that perfect spot, the perfect floor. Had to move some stuff around, but man, we're just over the moon. I mean, other than my own kids, this is my pride and joy,
Paul, you're not saying a whole lot.
Well, Ian's got a lot to say. So I wait for a specific question, and then I'm ready to go. But the truth is, Ian really is the blender of the family, and we have a small but mighty team. But I will say Ian is the head. I would say the master blender of Brothers Bond, for lack of a better word. And I really allow Ian to take a lot of the credit in creating a lot of our various SKUs. Obviously, what's really helpful is that him and I have the same palate. So as a result of that, we tend to agree. So obviously I taste everything and we go over things together and we always agree. So one thing we do agree on is bourbon.
Yep.
Don't agree on everything else, but bourbon, we definitely agree, which is a good thing.
Yeah, no, but when Paul and I, we built this together, like we talked about before, we blended this together for over a year, and then we got the rye perfect. And, it's been the most magical journey.
Yeah, it's been a cool journey for Mark, from going from being a sort of quote unquote celebrity brand that you know how it is. I mean, you're a real connoisseur in this industry and this specific spirits field is, bourbon is a very sort of, they like that sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of craft, sort of feel, that sort of family craft, organic, has to be something, generational. For a new brand to come in, particularly two guys who are on a television show that probably half the bourbon audience, half the bourbon drinkers haven't even watched, or more, let's say, because it's primarily, we have a big female audience. But, for us to kind of go in and now create a bourbon line that is a company that is respected, winning awards, and also prove ourselves to be two guys that actually care. We have a tiny, tiny team. We're literally doing everything ourselves, and this means a lot to us. This isn't something we're just doing to make some money. We really love bourbon, and it's just for us. That's what's exciting. Being on the phone with guys like you.
Well, there is no money. We don't get paid, and probably won't for about 20 years, and that's just what we're doing.
That's okay. You've got the royalty checks from Vampire Diaries coming in.
We actually don't.
I wish we did, Mark.
It's actually it's actually funny you say that. It's funny.
We were just talking about this, actually.
And actually, and this isn't a complaint, but dude, you want to hear a two-minute like sideline of how that statement is actually kind of funny in a way, but not like ha funny, like kind of funny.
Sure, go ahead.
In 2009, and Paul was way ahead of me in 2009. He had been testing for so many shows and had so many deals, and everybody wanted Paul Wesley in the season of 2009.
Yeah, what happened?
You became a big star, bro.
Yeah.
That's what happened. And so there was a huge Screen Actors Guild strike coming there. And in 2009, there were 68 pilots produced, shot in Hollywood. 64 of them were not Screen Actors Guild. There was only 4 of them were actually SAG. And so that was a very robust, dialed-in contract. And another union, an amazing union, now SAG and AFTRA are together. It was called AFTRA, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists. They came in and said, hey, listen, whoa. We don't want to shut our industry down. What we'll do is we'll switch from film to tape. We'll make the deal still, and everybody can shoot. Well, we were AFTRA. And in that contract, there was a new media clause that was very vague and didn't protect the actors. And so we don't have any royalty checks, and there is zero syndication. And we were actually, as a case study, the first show to ever hit the level of success we did where the actors did not receive a dime of syndication. How crazy is that?
That sucks.
It blows. Big time. Yeah, it's a big life changer for sure. I mean, life would have been very different. But hey, listen, we work hard. We love what we do. And this whiskey, this bourbon is this sort of amazing tale of how the brothers persist and the brothers keep going. Those boys bonded on screen over bourbon. Paul and I bonded off screen over bourbon. We were able to build this award-winning company, and it's talking to people like you that's helped us get there. And even the biggest industry insiders, people Paul and I talk to, when we explain to them that we've been in market for 3 years and 5 months, 306 months, I think, Paul, 3 years, 6 months.
Yeah.
And we are a company that is a debt-free company in profit. Not big profit. I'm talking tiny profit, but nonetheless, I think as far as a case study, it just doesn't happen. And it's a testament to, just religious and ruthless prioritization of our goals and quality, and just sharing experience, right? Because like we talked about years ago, we came from the entertainment world and we learned shared experience bonds people. Bourbon bonds people. And obviously food and beverage is what bonds people the most. Even the greatest enemies of a family, or the greatest enemies of the jungle or the African savannah, all come together around the watering hole, and that's what this is.
Yeah, I
amazing.
mean, Mark, I'm sure you have some questions for us, so please fire away, and I'll chime in as best as I can.
Well, I wanted to know what you guys have learned since we last talked. Sounds like you learned a lot about the business side of things.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
By default, yes. The hard way.
Yeah.
The hard way.
Baptism by fire, right?
Yeah, exactly.
What'd you learn?
A lot of key learnings, man. Go for it, Paul.
No, I think first of all, when you have a company, you just, there's a lot of, like, as an artist, as an actor, you're just sort of, you go on set, you do your thing, and then you sort of let everyone else sort of figure it out in many ways. You kind of just responsible for your sort of part in doing your role as best as possible. And you're not really running the show. And when it comes to this, having a bourbon company, you really are responsible for everything. You have also you have a fiduciary responsibility to investors, and so you need to really as Ian had mentioned earlier, there's a lot of the prioritization, ruthless prioritization. What is going to move the needle for us? And also, like, what is our identity? When we started this company, we were learning our identity, and now I think we know it. And with releases such as our 7-year bottled and bond, regenerative agriculture regenerative grain bourbon, our rye, our 95 proof rye, these are really expressions that are part of our identity. And we will be releasing more expressions and experimenting further and really trying to do something different, pioneer things differently, create different blends that are unique. And I think it just takes time. It takes time to really know what to prioritize and really understand what you want to be and what you're putting out there in the world. And we're now, as you mentioned, 3.5 years in, and I think we're in a really good place, really, really good place.
Ian, you've got the blender's art down now, just nosing it straight from the bottle.
Well, so we just did, we haven't released it yet. It's all in bottles that say not for sale. This rye was the first additional expression, and it was nerve-wracking for both Paul and I, because obviously it's a very small category and only the big dogs play in rye, right? And so you've got two paths you can take. You can go on like a barely legal 51% path, or you could go a strictly rye, which is really tough to do, or you can go somewhere really high. And we decided that that was for the enthusiasts. That was for the gatekeepers, the bartenders, the GMs, the people who really loved rye. But we wanted people who didn't necessarily know rye or think they liked it to really appreciate it, right? Shouldn't be an expert to have to enjoy something. And this rye had it shaken in our boots, and lo and behold, boom, it was like submission, double golded tag. It was double gold in San Francisco, or it was gold in San Francisco. We haven't submitted in a couple years. I guarantee you this batch next year is going to be a double gold. It was very special. And this is one of our older bottles. We actually had a pressure test issue with our pressure. There's a pressure sensor on the labeler, and there was a change part that was messed up, and all the labels got screwed up. Super high quality juice. But I was just smelling this nose and remembering, this is 77% rye, but 16% corn. It's a 4-grain rye, and it changed people's perception. And that's, like Paul mentioned, interesting blends, things that are meaningful to us, but things that change people's perception of what whiskey or bourbon is. And this one did. And the sales don't lie, right? You see it. People go, oh my gosh. And so, Mark, look at this crazy shit. I mean, actually, we just cleaned off like 70 bottles, but this is my desk. Like, look at this. This is how I live, man. It is a nonstop, and it's amazing that this is what we get to do. But like Paul mentioned, actually, I'm going to pour this regen. Did you try our regenerative whiskey? Did we get you any?
No.
All right. So I have one right here, Mark. See this box right here? I'm going to load this puppy up. I'm going to load it up and I'm sending this to you. Because I want you to try this regen. And a really late model or late in the run bottled in bond. And the new rye blend. It's the same barrel, it's just a slightly different. It's a different floor, still exquisite, just a slightly different profile, but it's on the nose. And like Paul mentioned, it's about something different. And when we release this regenerative whiskey, people are like, "What the hell is this?" And we made it from regenerative grains, and we made it down in North Carolina with our brother Pete Barger. I don't know. You ever meet Pete Barger down at Southern Distilling?
Yeah.
I mean, come on, dude. The guy is just he's a Renaissance man. I love that man. And one of the things that Paul and I really wanted to do, God, that nose. One of the things that Paul and I wanted to do, and this was 5 years ago we said this, which was, listen, 4 years is a long time, but we never wanted to bottle a drop of whiskey that wasn't 4 years old, at least 4 to 10, right? But it's a long time to wait. And we knew we had this regenerative stuff coming down the pipeline. How can we get it out as fast as we can without it seeming, but it's got to be the highest quality. Well, we went into barrel innovation, and there's no better person to do that with than Pete Barger. And one of the things we realized was one of the things that we pride ourselves in, and Southern Distilling does too, and Pete does in Vienna, is that when you have a distillate that is so damn clean and pure, you rely on your barrel a lot less to pay for the sins of distillation, dirty distillation, right? And so we're losing about 5 to 7% proof gallons, which when you look at the volume, that's a lot. It's a lot of money you're losing, but you're getting quality for it. And that's where this nuance comes in, man. Basically, the grains from this come within about 5 to 15 miles of the distillery. And when they come out of that truck under the chute, they hit that hammer. Actually, we don't use a hammer mill. The mill, hammer mills get super duper hot, and they just, and it's all electricity and that friction. They get hot and they scorch that. Let me plug this in. And they scorch that corn. Well, this is run by air and there's no heat. So when that corn comes off the truck and it goes in, boom, and it just gets milled and goes right into those cookers as this nuanced, beautiful, sweet, unadulterated corn. And that's one of the things that Paul and I and Fred Minnick were talking about, which is it's the nuance. And then basically what we did was we have a proprietary toast profile that is unlike anything that anyone has. And so we realized, man, this is it. So we blend a 3-year and our very special 6-year. And that 6-year basically is from wood. It's way northern wood, right? So it's obviously a different process. It's a different growth process. It's a lot slower. It's a lot more denser. It's a much denser wood, and it's magic. And so, we put this in bottles not too long ago, and it's pretty amazing because, obviously our love and passion for regenerative agriculture and how it's basically going to fix our climate and effectively build a, $1 trillion carbon capture food economy and start injecting about 50 to 80 billion back into middle America, which is effectively the reindustrialization of middle America. So we're the tip of the spear on some really huge things. And it's just wild that Paul and I and Vincent, Paul and I started this thing 15 years ago on this show that's reached something like 1.2 billion people or something now. And now we get to do this at this level. And this, I can't wait to get you because you'll right away pick up those notes of the toast. And that's one of the things that Paul and I love. And the distillate's so clean. The high wines coming off of this, Mark, I don't know if you ever had some of Pete's high wines, but our high wines coming off, I mean, dude, it's like you just want to sit under an oak tree and sip them. I mean, you can't because they're 136 proof, Paul. Like you got to be careful, but it's magic. It's fruit and dirt. It's what it tastes like, and that's what we put into the barrels. Just the cleanest distillate we've ever seen.
I was going to ask about the regenerative agriculture approach that you guys are taking.
Yeah.
Explain for people who aren't familiar with it what regenerative agriculture is.
I'll let Ian take that.
Paul, it's crazy, man. Even after the bottled and bond, that toast just comes through.
It's delicious, man. I'm right now. It's phenomenal.
It's just crazy. So, Mark, it's a great question. And Paul and I, listen, from the very beginning, we knew we were going to give a piece of our profits to regenerative ag because in a non-polarizing, non-politicizing way, regenerative ag has the ability to sequester. I'm going to restart this. Sequester enough carbon globally to bring it to zero net carbon. The reason we know that is I've seen the models. Like I see the data, right? Because we kind of create the data models. And so when people say, what the hell is regen ag and why should I care? It's just the use of planned grazing methods and the use of, agriculture, living, growing plants at scale to sequester enormous amounts of carbon and store it back in the ground where it belongs. Now, when you do that, you revitalize and you feed all those microorganisms in the soil. So the soil gets healthier physically, and it has an enormous ability to biosequester carbon. As a result of that, plants get healthier, nutritional value goes up. And then you don't use inputs, right? So farmers save like $400 an acre. Think about that from a numbers perspective. So, and they say, well, how? How are they saving that money? It's the lack of inputs. You're not putting in fungicides, herbicides, pesticides, chemical fertilizers, and then ding, 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 diesel, right? Think of that savings. And so, Paul and I always talk about this. We're like, look, man, we're a grain company, right? We use a lot of grains. And in this country, there's about 200 million grain acres, production acres, right? Well, if you do the math and you multiply 400 times 200 million, puts you at about $80 billion a year that we send offshore to other countries to agrochemical companies, right? So the idea is, why are we sending $80 billion a year of American farmers' money to Monsanto, which is German, and Syngenta, which is Chinese? There's no point. So it's really taken control and taken over. And that's something Paul and I, and Vincent and our team, we really are proud of because we see where this is going. And it's really special with Kiss the Ground and Common Ground, and now the third movie that we're in production on. Josh and Rebecca and the team are shooting like crazy. We see it. And we know that we can sequester enough carbon globally using smart agriculture to bring us to zero net carbon. And it's soon. It's a lot sooner than you think. So that's really all it is, right? It's just smart agriculture and limiting inputs. Now, listen, I am acutely aware that not all topographies are going to be an input-free place, right? Some topographical areas, you need some inputs, right? But it's a drastic reduction. And that's huge, man. Like you start injecting that kind of money into middle America, you think about it. Farmers have, more money to run down to the local, Chevy dealership and buy new trucks. They can take their wives and their kids to dinner once a week, not once a month. This is a big deal, for our economy and our world. And so for Paul and I to be able to sit on a world stage and release this was huge. And obviously, listen, there's, the Samuels family, who we all love and respect, they just put in certified, regenified, fully regenerative whiskey into barrels. But it's going to be ready in 6 years, which is amazing. But this was ready, I don't even know, Paul. We released this probably 4 or 6 months ago. So it was just about fast tracking this into the market, educating people, and like Paul just mentioned, bringing something new to the table that is a connective tissue that bonds people. But the quality speaks for itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Ian, are you now more of a whiskey maker than an actor, or are you still doing acting on the side?
No, I haven't acted in 5 years. Paul's the big celeb here. One of us had to stay in the papers. Captain Kirk is a pretty damn big role. He's shooting a movie right now too, but I'm super grateful. I mean, no, Paul's out there. He's shooting like crazy and traveling and doing press. And it's a full time, I have a vitamin company and I've got the films. We're finishing, getting Kiss the Ground and Common Ground out onto Amazon, finishing up the third movie, which is a year out. And no, I wasn't.
Never say never, Ian.
No, never say never. Hey, look, I mean, we just got the rights back to V-Wars, which took 3 years, and I would love to make that show again. But right now, Paul's the big celeb.
Well, I don't know about big celeb, but I'll take it. Thanks, Ian.
What movie are you working on, Paul?
I'm just doing a movie. Actually, I already wrapped just recently in New Mexico. It's a cool revenge thriller, actually, with a really great cast. Actually, Ian's buddy Josh Holloway from Lost is in it. Funnily enough, we were talking about Ian on set a bunch. Yeah. But yeah, it's cool. We'll see how it. You never know. With I think it's a really good one. The director's phenomenal. So, yeah.
And Paul, when do you guys start Star Trek again?
February. Yep.
Oh, that's right. February.
Yeah. So it's crazy. It's funny. We used to when we were shooting, we'd get like 2.5 months off, and then we'd go right back to set. And with shows these days, it's like it's been like a year and a half. I mean, it's just crazy. And then they shoot. They do 10 episodes max, right? So you work. Sorry, I digress, Mark. I know I'm talking about the entertainment industry here, but
it's
Ian
fine.
Ian and I work, 9 months out of the year,
right.
16, 17 hours a day. We barely had time to breathe. And now I'm not saying it's a walk in the park, but boy, I'll tell you, it's like they shoot 5 months out of the year, and then they get like a year break. And then it's like being on vacation. I'm just like, I feel like I was in boot camp and now I'm on vacation. It's crazy.
Gives you more time to drink whiskey.
Well, yeah, exactly.
It does. Mark, one of the things, Paul and I have been fortunate. We've had this place in Malibu on the beach for years now. That's sort of like our digital studio. And I mean, Paul, I could probably, other than a liquor store, I'm pretty sure that there's probably more whiskey in that place per square foot than anywhere in Southern California.
Yeah.
But it's a great place. I blend on our farm and blend there because it's on the ocean. So you get this really unique, very, very, very clean palate and nose. Your abilities to pull notes are actually really interesting. It's a great place to blend. But now, we're 5 years in, 3.5 years in market, but we're 5 years in. So a lot of the whiskey that we poured over and stressed over purchasing, which is, as you know, it's a very capital intensive, category. It's actually scary. The numbers are really crazy. But we were, a lot of our stuff, like this 7-year, I don't even think this is about to change the entire trajectory of our company, right? The way it's flying and people are loving it. But now with the regen, it's a different category. And then the one place that we've all really been wanting to go is wheat. But again, that's a big category. It's a little daunting. Only the big dogs play. Like, how do you compete? Not compete, but like, how do you put a bottle on the shelf next to, Weller or any of these big, it's a little daunting. Well, we took our time and we were really patient. And 7 years, well, it's 7 and 8, but it'll be 8 soon. Really, real high tech. It just says 7-8 year wheat. But dude, this is our 7-year wheated bourbon. I would rather drink this than pretty much any wheated whiskey on the planet. This was an enormous amount of work. a lot of shuffling, of barrels. But man, I can't wait for you to try it. And anyone we give it to, they kind of wig out a little bit, kind of like what this bottle and bond is. And again, it comes from patience, but then an enormous amount of just patience with the craftsmanship, right? Because it's the weirdest thing, man. Like, whether it's a rye, any of these, like our cask strength is 70 of our best barrels. Well, it's the same mash bill as our 80 proof. By the way, we might be kicking it up to 85, and it's delicious. But
Good.
Same mash bill. But it's our 70 best barrels for that season. So you're not just tasting through 70 barrels. You're tasting through 700 barrels. And you're finding those and you whittle them down, and then you get 70 barrels. And then you start finding those taste profiles and notes, and then you start putting them together and putting them together and putting them together. And finally, out of those 70, 750 mLs into this amazing bottle with all the notes and figures and what comes from what, part of the rick house, what floor, what barrels, it's like, it's crazy, man. And it's so funny because some seasons it's all the same cooperages, all the same cooperage. And then other seasons it's a mix of the two. But what's crazy is like our rye is literally the same cooperage and a similar time of distillation, more like later fallish, right? That early distillate is a much more even tone or temperature, allowed it to get into winter and just come down, really come together. And then those flavors, and then that liquid explodes as the temperature goes up. But sometimes Paul and I sit back and we look, and it's just an enormous amount of bottles everywhere. And we realize it's really an honor to be able to do this, but this is a tough business. If you want to excel in this business, and the big dogs, as much as they love you when you're having conversations or around a bar, they really don't want you there at all. Not on the shelf. Everyone's friends until it's time to get on the shelf.
Yep.
And even Jim Rutledge taught me that. He's like, listen, if you're a whiskey blender or you're a distiller, you're part of your community, your family. But then it gets a little intense when you get to the shelf. And it's a special time, man. But I can't wait for you to try this wheated bourbon. My goodness.
Thanks to Ian Somerhalder and Paul Wesley for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Bourbon, a deliciously smooth single malt, known for its coastal charm and Highland heritage, loved by whiskey lovers worldwide. Discover Bourbon's full lineup at malts.com. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the Brothers Bond 7-year-old bottled in bond bourbon. Of course, it's bottled at 50% ABV, and the nose on my sample has touches of caramel apples, soft spices, honey, vanilla, and a hint of oak. The taste has notes of cherry cola, dried fruits, black pepper, caramel, red apples, and maple syrup, and the finish is long, spicy, and bold. I'm scoring the Brothers Bond bottled in bond bourbon a 93. Next up, let's look at the new Canadian Club Invitation Series, issue number 2. It's an 18-year-old Canadian whiskey bottled at 58% ABV. The nose has touches of caramel, toffee, butterscotch, and honey. The taste has notes of caramel, soft spices, toffee, and butterscotch, and the finish is long with gentle spices. I'm scoring the Canadian Club Invitation Series, issue number 2, a 93. Finally, let's look at a unique Canadian whiskey from 40 Creek. Maplewood Select is finished with maple staves allowed to soak into the maturing whiskey, and it's bottled at 45% ABV. The nose has a touch of maple syrup, along with honey, vanilla, tree fruits, caramel, and butterscotch candies. The taste has notes of butterscotch, maple syrup, pears, peaches, and a touch of white pepper that comes alive slowly, while the finish is long and spicy with a touch of sweetness. I'm scoring the 40 Creek Maplewood Select Canadian Whiskey a 93. I'll be adding these whiskeys to our searchable list of more than 3,800 different whiskeys from all over the world. Check it out this week at WhiskyCast.com. Let's open up the inbox now and see what people are talking about this week. The collapse of Waterford whiskey was top of mind this week, and we should note that Waterford was the sponsor of this segment until this week's collapse. Ian Bruce posted this in the WhiskyCast community app. Very sad to hear, as Waterford were always advancing and pushing the envelope into flavor and what drives the taste of their drams. Is this another victim of the current caskaclism of a whiskey lock appearing, in addition with cask prices and taxes? Dave Kuhn posted this in the app as well. I hate this. Remy Cointreau should come in and save it. I know that would be some sick irony, but they could reunite Bruichladdich with the Irish Evolution. Pete at Whiskey Ranked added, it was always on my list of whiskeys to try. Is it wrong that I'm inclined to go out and buy a bottle now that I know it will be gone soon? And HRC posted this. Wow, expected some closures but didn't see this one coming. I appreciated what they were trying to do. We'll be opening a bottle tonight in their memory. Former Waterford U.S. importer Raj Saberwal posted this comment on Facebook. Feel for the employees, the growers, suppliers, and investors. This follows on the closure of Renegade Rum. And Christina Wolf added, for me, it is the lack of permanent products in the portfolio that enables them to survive on the market. Something like a Lafroig 10, a product that is in constant demand, in other words, the cash cow. Everything else that excites the connoisseur is not precisely these products what is exciting, but is still bought by this target group. Of course, that would have taken time and investment. So sad about both. And the bankruptcy of Kentucky Owl brought this simple comment from Christopher Glenn. Buckle up, kiddos. If you have a comment, a question, or a suggestion, download the free WhiskyCast community app and join the conversation. You'll find it in your app store, and you can also reach us on Threads, Blue Sky, X, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. In 1876, the J.S. Bentley sank in Lake Huron with a load of rye grain in the hold. 148 years later, divers were able to salvage some of the grain from Michigan's Mammoth Distilling, and Rob Report notes that some of the grain appears to be intact even after being underwater for that long. Mammoth is working with rye scientists at Michigan State University to try and grow some of the seeds from that rye for distilling use. They've also sequenced the DNA from the seeds to identify what modern rye grains might have come from this genetic line, and they plan to splice that DNA onto some of those modern rye grains to create new hybrids that might produce whiskey one day. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from your app store. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Dewar's Double Double 38-year-old blended malt has arrived, and it's a true gem for collectors. Secure a bottle, and you'll be adding a rare piece of history to your collection.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.